Do you want to talk about movies that truly blew Tarantino's mind? Start with Deep Red, Dario Argento's blood-soaked, nerve-shredding giallo classic. What hidden gems would you find? We all know the legends, Star Wars, The Godfather, Jaws. But what about the movies that shaped Tarantino's obsessions, his stories, and maybe even his very soul? Today we're diving into the gritty, rebellious, and sometimes bizarre heart of 1970s filmmaking. This isn't your usual top 10 list. It's a countdown of the only 12 movies from the 70s that Tarantino absolutely insists you see before you die. Prepare for cult classics, wild rides, and a whole new way to look at film. Deep Red, Profondo Rosso, 1975. This isn't some run-of-the-mill horror flick. It's an all-out assault on the senses, a film that screams with color, violence, and a soundtrack that pounds harder than anything you'd heard in the 70s. Tarantino walked into Deep Red as a teenager, expecting maybe a few jump scares. What he got instead was a relentless parade of brutal murders, each more imaginative and shocking than the last, all staged with Argento's almost operatic flair for suspense. But it wasn't just the kills that stuck with him. The way Deep Red unfolds, following David Hemmings as composer, as he stumbles into the aftermath of a psychic's murder, teaming up with a feisty journalist, and uncovering layers of secrets, is pure, propulsive mystery. Argento's direction is so confident, it feels effortless. Tarantino always talks about how some directors seem to struggle with every shot, but here, Argento just glides. The whole film came together miraculously, he once said, like it was meant to be. The violence, the haunting goblin score, the dreamlike logic, it's all a hypnotic package. If you think you know Italian horror but haven't seen Deep Red, you don't know Italian horror at all. Tarantino rates it as one of the definitive horror experiences, and that's saying something. Rolling Thunder, 1977. Now, if you want to understand the other side of the 70s, the angry, vengeful, post-Vietnam malaise, look no further than Rolling Thunder. Tarantino's obsession with this film is legendary. He calls it the perfect marriage of character study and action. A revenge flick that's as psychological as it is brutal. William Devane stars as a Vietnam vet coming home to a world that's moved on without him. A man so emotionally scarred that even the smallest pleasures seem out of reach. When a sadistic gang tears apart what little life he has left, culminating in a horrifying garbage disposal scene, he teams up with fellow vet Tommy Lee Jones to mete out violent retribution. Tarantino chased Rolling Thunder for a decade, catching screenings wherever he could before it was available on home video. For him, it wasn't just a story about payback. It was about the psychic wounds of war, about men broken and reshaped by violence, who find purpose only in the fire of revenge. It's also, frankly, one of the most badass movies of its era. The action is lean and mean, the pacing relentless, and the emotional core never gets lost in the carnage. Tarantino credits this movie as a blueprint for how to do revenge right, where you actually care about the characters, not just the body count. And that's why, for him, Rolling Thunder is an enduring classic. The Bad News Bears, 1976. Not every movie Tarantino loves is a blood-soaked odyssey. Sometimes it's just a perfect comedy about losers, misfits, and the people who believe in them anyway. Enter The Bad News Bears, a scrappy, no-filter Little League film starring Walter Matthau as an alcoholic ex-ball player who gets roped into coaching a team of the worst kids you've ever seen on a diamond. What makes this film so essential, in Tarantino's eyes, isn't just its humor, though it's hilarious, from the opening pitch to the last wild inning. It's that it's real. These aren't sanitized Hollywood kids. They cuss, they mess up, and they have genuine problems. The script, written by Bill Lancaster, is personal and biting, drawing inspiration from real-life relationships. Mathau's Buttermaker is gruff, lazy, and sometimes even mean, but he cares in his own way, and the film's heart comes from those rough edges. Tarantino's not alone in his praise. Filmmakers like Philip Seymour Hoffman and Kevin Smith have also called it a favorite. The film's legacy is massive, spawning sequels, remakes, and a sitcom, but none of them captured the magic of the original. For Tarantino, The Bad News Bears is a model of how to make a comedy with stakes, soul, and a little bit of dirt under its fingernails. The outfit, 1973. Every crime film since the 70s owes a debt to the outfit, and Tarantino is one of its loudest modern champions. Directed by John Flynn and adapted from the legendary Donald Westlake's Parker novels, this is a movie that cuts right to the bone. There's no glossy romanticizing of gangsters here, just pure, no-nonsense blue-collar grit. Robert Duvall stars as Macklin, a recently released convict who goes on a cold, calculated rampage against the syndicate that murdered his brother. No monologues, no wasted motion. Just a guy who's good at his job and won't stop until the job's done. Tarantino loves this kind of storytelling, efficient, hard-hitting, and as sharp as a straight razor. He's praised the outfit for its relentless pacing and its refusal to sentimentalize its characters or their crimes. The film's violence is matter of fact, the dialogue is terse and witty, and the supporting cast, including Joe Don Baker and Karen Black, is stellar. For Tarantino, this is real crime cinema, not the glorified myth-making of bigger budget studio fare, but a down-and-dirty look at the way criminals actually operate. If you want to see where movies like Reservoir Dogs get their DNA, you start with The Outfit, A Man Called Horse, 1970. If you want to trace the roots of Tarantino's fascination with transformation and cultural identity, you've got to start with A Man Called Horse. This isn't your typical Western, and Tarantino zeroes in on that fact. Richard Harris stars as John Morgan, an English aristocrat captured by a Sioux tribe, and the film's power lies in its brutal honesty. Tarantino never forgot seeing the eagle claws through the chest initiation as a kid, a scene so graphic and intense it burned itself into his memory. But it's not just shock for shock's sake. The ritual is about rebirth, about shedding old identities and being forged into something new. As Morgan is forced to adapt and eventually becomes a respected member of the tribe, Tarantino sees a metaphor for all outsiders, all people lost and searching for purpose. The film doesn't shy away from violence or suffering, but there's a respect for Sioux culture that sets it apart from more exploitative films of the era. It's rough around the edges and sometimes leans into B-movie territory. But that rawness is exactly what Tarantino admires. He even points out how the sequel, The Return of a Man Called Horse, though not as acclaimed, still has its fans, including George Lucas, who noticed director Irvin Kershner's skills and picked him for The Empire Strikes Back. For Tarantino, A Man Called Horse is about transformation, physical, spiritual, and cinematic. House of Dark Shadows, 1970. Before vampires were sparkly or tragic romantics, there was House of Dark Shadows. Directed by Dan Curtis, this film spun off from the iconic soap opera, and Tarantino cites it as a turning point in his own relationship with horror. As a kid, watching this film wasn't just entertainment, it was an awakening. Jonathan Frid's Barnabas Collins, accidentally released from his coffin, was something new, a monster who was also oddly sympathetic, trapped by his own hunger and haunted by family secrets. Tarantino remembers staring at the screen, mouth agape, barely able to believe what he was seeing. House of Dark Shadows was campy, sure, but it was also full-on gothic horror, drenched in atmosphere and bloody spectacle. The movie was made during the height of the TV show's popularity, with the cast juggling both productions. The film didn't just cash in on its TV roots, it elevated them, pushing boundaries for gore and psychological complexity. For Tarantino, it wasn't just about the scares. It was about realizing what movies could do, how far they could go, and how much they could subvert expectations. It's a film that stuck with him, proof that horror and soap opera melodrama could create something entirely new. Switchblade Sisters, 1975. If Tarantino ever had a cinematic crush, it might just be on Switchblade Sisters. Jack Hill's grindhouse masterpiece is the kind of film Tarantino doesn't just love, the champions. He loved it so much, in fact, that he re-released it under his Rolling Thunder Pictures label, giving it a second life for new audiences. The movie is a wild, pulpy ride, an all-female gang, turf wars, shifting alliances, betrayals, and more quotable dialogue per minute than most movies dream of. What sets Switchblade Sisters apart from Tarantino is the authenticity of its chaos. It's over the top, sure, but the emotions are real, and the characters, especially Lace and Maggie, are sharply drawn. Tarantino has gone through the original script and called it a total gem. Every page, he says, has a line worth quoting, a joke that lands, or a moment that reveals character. He admires the way the movie balances camp and sincerity. You're laughing one minute and genuinely caring the next. This isn't just nostalgia talking. Tarantino argues that the film holds up as a riotous, heartfelt slice of exploitation cinema. It's a favorite for a reason. Bold, brash, and absolutely unforgettable 5 Easy Pieces, 1970. For Tarantino, few films capture the spirit of a changing America quite like 5 Easy Pieces. This is a movie about drifting, about not quite fitting in anywhere, a feeling Tarantino says was everywhere in the air as New Hollywood took over. Jack Nicholson plays Bobby Dupea, a former piano prodigy who's walked away from everything and everyone, now living as an oil rig worker and trying to outrun his past. What strikes Tarantino is how the film balances existential melancholy with moments of surprising warmth. Bobby isn't a hero. He's prickly, selfish, sometimes cruel, but he's also deeply human. Tarantino often points to the legendary chicken salad sandwich diner scene as a perfect example of how a simple moment can reveal so much about a character. The movie's release was a pivotal moment for Hollywood. Tarantino argues that if 5 Easy Pieces hadn't worked, the whole New Hollywood experiment might have collapsed. No Godfather, no Exorcist, nothing. It was that close to falling apart. Instead, Nicholson's performance, the spare direction, and the underlying sense of restlessness made it a classic. For Tarantino, it's not just a movie, it's a turning point in film history. Mass H, 1970. There's a moment in film history when the boundaries of genre and tone just get shattered, and MASH is a prime example. Tarantino doesn't mince words about this one. He didn't care for the TV show, but Robert Altman's film, that was a game changer. Set in the Korean War but made during the Vietnam era, MASH is a war movie that feels like a hangout comedy, blood-soaked, anarchic, and constantly teetering between laughter and horror. For Tarantino, the film's biggest achievement is its honesty. The doctors and nurses in this field hospital cope with the insanity of war, not by heroics, but by getting drunk, pulling pranks, and barely holding themselves together. It's not just the comedy that makes MASH asterisk essential, it's the messiness. Altman's overlapping dialogue, the chaotic scenes, the sense that you're dropped into the middle of real chaos. Tarantino admires all of it. The movie even shook up the Cannes Film Festival, winning the Palme d'Or amidst a split jury that led to changes in festival rules. And more than anything, Tarantino sees MASH as a movie that could only exist at that exact moment. Any later, and Hollywood would have watered it down. Any earlier, and the world wouldn't have been ready. It's a war movie, a protest movie, and a comedy, an impossible mix, pulled off with a wink and a middle finger to authority. The Getaway, 1972. Few films embody the muscular, sunburnt cool of early 70s cinema, like Sam Peckinpah's The Getaway, a film Tarantino often brings up as one of the purest action crime stories of its era. The setup is deceptively simple. Steve McQueen is Doc McCoy, a master thief fresh out of prison, who pulls off a complicated bank heist with his wife Carol. But of course, nothing goes as planned. The movie quickly turns into a relentless chase, with double crosses, gunfights, and the claustrophobic sense that no one, not even the hero's allies, can be trusted. What hooks Tarantino is Peckinpah's signature style, balletic violence, razor-sharp editing, and a refusal to let his characters off easy. The chemistry between McQueen and McGraw is electric and real, giving the film a heat that's hard to fake. Tarantino loves the way The Getaway strips the crime genre down to its essentials. Every scene pushes the story forward, every betrayal hurts, and the violence is never cartoonish. He's also a fan of Jim Thompson's original novel, but it's Peckinpah's vision, sweaty, suspenseful, and morally murky, that really influenced his own ideas about crime films. In Tarantino's eyes, The Getaway is all killer, no filler. Sorcerer, 1977. You hear the title Sorcerer, and maybe you think wizards, spells, something supernatural. Forget all that. This is William Friedkin's spiritual successor to The French Connection and The Exorcist, and it's pure tension from the first frame to the last. Tarantino is a fierce defender of this film, a notorious box office bomb, yes, but in his mind, a suspense masterpiece. The setup. 4 desperate men from different corners of the world, all on the run, are hired to drive trucks loaded with nitroglycerin through the unforgiving jungles of South America. One wrong bump, one careless move, and boom, game over. Tarantino loves how Sorcerer is a movie made for grown-ups, the kind of slow-burn thriller Hollywood doesn't make anymore. It's bleak, nerve-wracking, and completely uncompromising. Released just 1 month after Star Wars, it never stood a chance financially, but Tarantino and directors like Francis Ford Coppola hail it as one of the decade's great achievements. Friedkin himself calls it his best work. For Tarantino, the film's set pieces, especially the jaw-dropping bridge sequence, are some of the greatest suspense moments ever committed to film. Sorcerer is proof that sometimes box office failure has nothing to do with artistic greatness. Dark Star, 1974. John Carpenter's Dark Star is proof that brilliance can come from the unlikeliest places. Even a shoestring budget student film. Before Halloween, before The Thing, Carpenter made this quirky, countercultural sci-fi comedy with co-writer Dan O'Bannon. The premise, a small crew on a mission to destroy unstable planets, grows more bored and unhinged by the day. There's an alien that looks suspiciously like a beach ball, existential dread about cleaning your underwear in space, and the kind of stoner humor that feels both dated and weirdly timeless. Tarantino sees Dark Star as a hippie-era, anti-establishment classic, a film that flips the grandiosity of 2001, A Space Odyssey, on its head. He loves the handmade effects, the lo-fi charm, and the fact that, underneath the goofiness, there's something almost profound about loneliness and futility. Carpenter himself has said he was inspired to make something grounded, rejecting the religious overtones of Kubrick's epic for a story about real problems. Tarantino calls it a masterpiece, and you can see why. It's funny, subversive, and bursting with the kind of creative energy that would later define an entire generation of genre filmmakers. If you want to see where Carpenter, and maybe a whole new kind of sci-fi, was born, you start here. So, there you have it. The 12 movies from the wild, untamed 1970s that Quentin Tarantino believes every true film lover must experience. Each one changed the game, rewrote the rules, or burned itself into the memory of a future master storyteller. Which of these have you seen? Which are you adding to your watch list right now? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives, hidden classics, and cinematic secrets, make sure to like this video, share it with your fellow movie obsessives, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, keep your eyes open, and remember, the real classics are always just waiting to be discovered.